one of the things that I always talk about is that all of us forget what others don't know because we spend so much time in our heads that we forget that, oh, well, doesn't everybody know that we are going to be moving in a year? Oh, I guess they wouldn't know that, would they? But do you know what I mean? It's we forget what's inside our head and inside our head alone. And so what we do is we help, and this is where the ask phase really comes in and is helpful. We really help them step back and think about the people they're trying to help, the people they're trying to bring along with them, the work that they're trying to accomplish, and remind them what the rest of the world doesn't know.
You're listening to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast. Here's your host, Stu Swineford.
Hey everybody, Stu here. My guest today is Douglas Spencer, and he is the founder of Spencer Brenneman, which is a really cool content shop out of Boston. And what they do is they work with purpose-driven companies and nonprofits. They help them remember their message so that they can thrive in any environment. He has a really great methodology for this, and he and I met during a networking opportunity, an online networking opportunity called Nonprofit.ist. We had a really fun conversation, as all of our conversations have been, just around content and how to leverage it and ways to really get that message out there and be consistent, etc. I think this is a great episode for any organization. You can get a lot out of this discussion that we had, and Douglas is just a great guy, and I hope you enjoy the show. Here we go. Hello, Douglas. How are you today?
Stu, I am great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. What's going on in Boston?
Oh my gosh, Boston. Well, we've had a very rainy summer, and we're about ready to get bombarded with some intense heat tomorrow and the next day. So, we're just having a good old summertime.
That sounds fairly, fairly normal, I guess, for Boston. We've had a fairly wet summer thus far up here in Colorado as well, which has been very, very grateful for that. We're starting to get a lot of smoke from the Dixie fire out in California, and I'm just happy. Well, I'm sad for all those people and animals and forest lands that are getting hammered out there, but I'm happy that it's not very close to home just yet. So far this year, we've knock on wood. Right.
Yeah. When it's hard to complain about the weather these days when you see what's happening around the world in Greece and the Dixie fires and all sorts of places. So it's hard to complain about a few days of steady rain.
For sure. It's amazing here. I don't know if you've ever been to Colorado, but it is amazing how quickly Coloradans will turn on the weather when it's not perfect. People will suffer through a day and a half of rain, and then they start complaining. And it's like, come on, guys, we really need the moisture. Let's not complain.
Right. Exactly.
Well, tell me a bit about this. Is going to be a little bit of an interesting show because we're both going to kind of interview each other for our perspective podcasts. And so why don't you? Well, we're on both shows will be the same. So
right.
Relish This. And then what's the name of your podcast?
My podcast is Messaging on a Mission. So, Stu, thanks for having me on yours, and thanks for being a guest on mine all at the same time.
It's my pleasure. I get to guest every once in a while, and it's so much fun to be kind of on the other side of the equation from time to time. So it'll be fun to see how we can kind of tackle that together today.
That's right. And we are, for all the listeners, we are operating without a net. We are just winging this, and let's hope it's entertaining.
Well, if our first conversation together, which was about a month ago, holds true, then I'm sure it will be. I was entertained, at least. I had a really good time talking with you, and I'm sure that we'll dig out some fun marketing and purpose-driven stuff today for people.
Absolutely. Same here.
So you are one of the co-founders of Spencer Brennan. Is that accurate?
Actually, no. I am the only founder. I'm Spencer. Spencer is my surname, but because it's rather generic, I added my mother's maiden name, which is Brenneman. So my business is called Spencer Brennan, and we help mission-driven organizations take a step back and rethink their focus. Also, they can find exactly the right messaging framework through which they can connect with everybody that's important to their success, from their employees to the people they help to their donor base to any kind of regulatory authority that they have to work with. Anybody that is instrumental in making them successful, we help them find the right message to really bring their mission home.
Well, I think that's great. We really look at that whole ecosystem in terms of all of the different places that an organization, a business, whether that's a nonprofit business or a for-profit business, all of those touch points, all those places that one can have an influence in the world, and it goes. It's really broad. You can talk to vendors about being purpose driven. Obviously your employees and your internal culture is a big component of that, but even the people you choose to work with, or other business owners, just by living kind of that purposeful taking that approach to business, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to change the world.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your business.
So I am one of the co-founders of Relish Studio. It's a digital marketing agency here in the Boulder, Colorado area. And we like to say we help good people do great things. And we really look for businesses, both in the for and nonprofit space, who are seeking to expand their mission to help thrive and get found online and really build relationships through digital marketing. And we've been around since about 2008 and are going strong. It's kind of funny. We tend to blow past these milestones in our history, but we'll be 13 years old in September.
Wow. Congratulations. Good stuff.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Right. And you started at not the best time to start a business, if I can remember 2008 correctly.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we certainly have seen cycles in our business, and it feels like election years are always challenging. And of course, we went ahead and launched during an election year. I don't know that we thought things through very much. We kind of took that run before you walk kind of approach, which I know a lot of entrepreneurs do. And it's certainly not what I recommend for our clients here at Relish. We kind of just winged it, kind of like what we're doing here today with the podcast. But it's worked out so far. And I think that, starting with strategy is certainly something that we do. I think going back to vision, values, and mission, and really making sure that those things are all aligned and everyone knows what direction we're all rowing is important. But many business leaders just kind of say, well, let's just do this thing and then figure it out along the way. Right. I think that having a plan is better, but we've managed to make it work.
Yes. Well, I totally agree. And yeah, I'm guilty of that sometimes myself, even though I certainly counsel my clients to do the opposite. So I guess that's just part of being a human being.
Yes, it is. So I know you have a pretty interesting way of getting to that kind of messaging methodology. Tell both our audiences a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So we have a methodology that we call ABC, Ask, Build, and Connect. And the first one is really just asking a lot of questions. It's both qualitative and quantitative. We'll do online research when we can, or other types of research, or use any data that the organization might have. But we also ask a lot of questions, and it almost turns into, I don't mean to be dismissive, but it almost turns into a therapy session sometimes, where we really try to get people to step back and think about why it is they do what they do, and why is it important to them personally, and then why is it important to the broader population, to the world, to the people they serve. What is that why? Why is this work important? And I distinctly remember one time in particular, we were working with a client and we were going through a workshop, and I swear I could have seen across his face him falling in love with what he did again. And he'd been in the business for many, 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 many years. And it just kind of like a light bulb just went off, and it helped reconnect him with his original passion. And that too, I think, is normal, that, we focus so much on the day to day, we lose track of where we started and where we wanted to go. And it's always about trying to make the squeakiest wheel be quiet. And when we focus on that, sometimes we lose sight of the big picture, which is what our methodology tries to do. It tries to bring people back to where they started, or at least bring them to the place where they should start from this moment forward.
I love that approach. I certainly could have used that perspective back in kind of the early phases of Relish. We found ourselves in exactly that spot, kind of in that 2014, 2015 zone. We started feeling like we were working for the business as opposed to, running the business. And it was like, well, if I'm going to be doing things that I don't want to do, for example, then what, why am I taking on all this other entrepreneurial stuff as well? I could just go get a job.
Right.
And that was really when we took a step back and said, well, how do we approach this from a position of purpose and really come at marketing and at what we do from that angle. And that's when we became a 1% for the Planet partner. We joined a couple of other organizations like Colorado Outdoor Business Alliance here in the state, and really said, we have an opportunity to kind of craft this business how we want. And if we don't want to wear ties, or we don't want to work on Wednesday afternoon, or whatever it is, we're ultimately in charge. And so I love that more and more business leaders are really kind of embracing this idea that you have the opportunity to really create and influence culture.
Right. And we did this. I go back and forth between saying we and I, because even though I'm the only person here, I do have a team of freelancers and contractors that feels like we're all together. So I go back and forth. I'm not crazy, at least because of that. So if you see my pronoun confusion, that's where it comes from.
That's fine.
But we had to shift about a year ago during the pandemic, because before that we were helping pretty much anybody that we thought we could. And about April of 2020, I started thinking that, all right, what do I want to do? Do I want to help organizations that are just trying to make as much money as possible? Or do I want to try to help organizations that are at least trying to solve some sort of problem that we all face? And it became pretty easy. It became pretty clear that that's where my heart was at. And I also feel like, I came from the for-profit sector. I worked at a large corporation for many, many, many years. And I think that I learned so much during those years that I got excited about the idea of passing that on to people that wouldn't necessarily have access to that kind of thought process, or those kind of methodologies, or those kind of approaches. And so that's why we shifted last year to focus on mission-driven organizations.
What are you doing to get in front of mission-driven organizations? It's not one of those things that you can search for in LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Are there any things that you've tried that have worked really well to kind of make sure that you're able to connect with those types of people?
That's a great question. And much like you starting your business in 2008, I feel like I've restarted my business, in the middle of a pandemic and a global recession. And one of the ways before the pandemic that we would find new businesses is through networking and going to events and talking to people. And of course, in the last year, that's all but dried up. And so that has been a real challenge. And so what we have done is dialed up our content marketing. We're really focused on trying to produce content that's relevant and useful to folks and getting in front of them. We have a newsletter we do every month. We post quite a bit on LinkedIn, and we've dialed up our Facebook presence for those folks that are more Facebook oriented than LinkedIn oriented. So it's really all about the content to remind folks that, first of all, we're here. Second of all, we do have an expertise in the area, and we can help them with their problems. But most importantly, it's just to get in front of them, try to help them. Even if it's just through the read of, say, a blog post, or if it's through more of a more formal relationship.
Yeah, I think that's just great. I know that we met at a Nonprofit.ist kind of event, right?
Right.
So there are still opportunities to do some networking. Clearly we live, quite a few miles apart. So it's not like we were able to meet in person, but I believe we were in a breakout room together and then followed up and jumped on a call. So, people, there are ways to continue to build and make those kinds of connections out there, and just leveraging all of that. Cause we were the same way. One of my KPIs, in fact, was how many networking events did I go to every month, because we saw that those tended to turn into conversations that then led to, partnerships and revenue driving activities. Right. Which is what we're all after at the end of the day, I suppose.
Indeed. So actually, let me ask you a question about content, because we had talked a little bit before about the role that content plays. And so it's pretty important in my business, but how are you using how are you advising your clients to think about content when it comes to furthering the messages behind their missions?
Yeah, that's, that's a whole, episode in itself. I'm sure. One of the things that we kind of look at is content being, if you have kind of three main things that go into your online presence, just thinking about your website, content is really the primary thing that you need. You need that material to put into a website, first of all. And then one of the things that we're really seeing with search engine optimization, or SEO, is that content is really starting to become what the search engines just are looking for. And where back in the day you could maybe kind of spoof the system and get better placement through, through some SEO techniques, which you can still do. And there's certainly a place for pure SEO work. But one of the things we always recommend is start with the audience and make sure that you're writing for your audience. You're creating valuable, information and valuable materials that people are going to, have a good time and enjoy and get something out of reading, or watching or listening to. Right. And then, you can make some tweaks, and I'm sure there's some SEO experts out there who would probably see some gaps in this philosophy. But ultimately, if you create great content, then that's the thing that's going to create the opportunity to build those relationships. Right. And so we kind of see those three pillars as really overlapping. You need a website to put content into, you need content for your website, you need content for SEO, and your website needs SEO, and those things kind of overlap. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff kind of outside those three pillars. So, everything from email marketing to, inbound or content marketing, paid advertising, social media, et cetera. All those things also rely on content, but they fall kind of outside of that main kind of foundational stuff that pretty much every business needs.
Right. I get the feeling, and this just kind of popped in my head as you were talking, I get the feeling that we're almost like back at the beginning of the web, when people started having web pages. Like everybody had to have a web page, but they made it and then they didn't touch it for months. And I feel like some organizations are kind of thinking that way when it comes to content. All right, we'll put some content up, and okay, now what? And
right.
And it's got to be something that is dynamic. It's got to be something that's useful, and it's got to be something that continues to speak to their audiences in new ways. Mm-hmm. And to your point about the other pillars, it's got to be consistent with everything, all those other media from email marketing and all the other stuff. So I really think that people aren't thinking about content the way they need to. I think they think about it in terms of, well, yeah, I should do that. Same with SEO. I mean, right. I don't think a lot of people understand SEO. I certainly am no expert, and I certainly hate writing for algorithms, which is what I've had a client a few years ago. We had a client that really wanted us to write for the search engines, and like, That's really hard. And it's, in the end of the day, it's really not even useful because, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're way more know way more about SEO than I do. But at the end of the day, it's not even really useful because even if the search engine does find it, you've got your prospect reading it, and is it connecting? Well,
Right.
probably not.
Well, and the bots, the search engines themselves are getting smarter and smarter every day, and they can tell the difference between something that's been written for a person
Yes.
versus something that's been written to help them feel good. And again, that's just getting harder and harder to kind of spoof. Yeah. And so we always start with content because, people have relationships with people, and yes, you may feel like you have some relationships to a brand. If there's some, brand that you really love, if you're a Chevy guy or whatever, whatever it is.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's, there are people running that show. And so it really is, people to people, even though we use terms like business to consumer and business to business, it's, at the end of the day, it really is people to people. And another thing that we have tried to help our clients, and we've tried to do it ourselves, is really look at how you're positioning your organization in the story that you're trying to tell. And so we've moved quite a bit toward the idea that if you can always put your customer in the hero seat of that story, where your business or your organization is the guide in that journey, create opportunities to express empathy and demonstrate authority for sure. But if you can use the you and your language as much as possible in your content, that tends to really help start those relationships and build those relationships. Because it's not, people don't necessarily want to go to a cocktail party and listen to me talk about me for 45 minutes. They want to hear how they fit into that story.
Exactly. And obviously, the thing that we all forget sometimes is that all the decisions we make are emotional. We just use the analytics to justify the emotions what we want to do. If buying cars was just about getting from point A to point B, everyone would be driving a Prius. But that's not what it's about. It's about trying to, we buy specific cars because we make up a thing, they're safer or whatever. But basically, we just want what we want. And so when we do this kind of content marketing, it's using that you and putting yourself in the audience's shoes, but it's also trying to make them feel something at the same time. And I think one of the things that's great for the client bases that you and I have is that's slightly easier. It's really hard to get people excited about private equity software, but it's a lot easier to get people excited or feeling something about helping kids that have been victims of child abuse.
Yeah. What's interesting, and this is something that we have been exploring quite a bit, is in the nonprofit space, for example. So if we're speaking about an organization trying to get people to donate their time or money to help fuel a cause, the kind of that standard marketing funnel idea doesn't necessarily hold true. In a for-profit relationship. So if there's a thing that I want to buy, let's just say it's a new bike, right? And I've decided that I'm shopping for a new bike, and you can start to get numbers and understand by creating awareness and then broadening that reach of that awareness, that when you just kind of throw people into the top of that funnel and give them something valuable, that eventually they're going to kind of come out the bottom of that funnel, a certain number of them, and purchase that bike. And the reward for that decision comes after you've collected the money from that person. And so the friction is, there's always this thing that's going to help ease that friction of paying for a physical thing, of deciding to buy a bike. However, in the nonprofit space, it's it's really not a funnel. It's like a mountain, and you're constantly having to battle this friction that people have, because most people don't wake up in the morning and say, well, how can I give away some of my money
Right.
or some of my time today? And so the reward comes actually before you've collected the funds, for example. And so you have to continue to motivate people. There's just an additional volume of friction, and it's not just as, and it's not easy on the for-profit space, but it's not just throwing numbers at the top of the funnel. It's continuing to battle that friction all along those decision paths. And you have to also combat the idea of, why should I give to this organization versus another organization, and also, or not at all. And I guess you could make the same kind of statement for a purchase. However, it's just a lot less frictiony.
Right. Well, I think, when you with bikes, for example, I think that a lot of smart retailers or smart folks that are in that business try to create community around a particular type of bike or the type of bike or biker, just as not-for-profits are. It's almost like, come join our team in a way that is that is, come join our work, come join us on our mission, come be part of this solution. And then, to your point, and then that's when you get to kind of the transaction element of it first. But it's creating that community first, and then bringing them, and then, closing the deal, so to speak, where the other way around, it's usually trying to keep them there in a community that you then help create.
Yeah. That community building aspect is just huge. And that's a really kind of how we look at marketing, is that it's just really all about relationship building.
Yeah.
And it may be an easy relationship to build where, I need lunch and there's a restaurant there. And so that's not as challenging of a relationship to create, because there's a big need and an immediate relatively low cost solution to the problem. Or it can be, you really need to try to get people over months and months to feel like they're part of this thing, in order to get them to take an expensive action. So a car, I think, is a decent example where you have a really high price point item, and you need to get people on board with this thing is going to make them cool. I was actually, when you first mentioned cars, I was like, yeah, a car in and of itself isn't cool. It's the perception or the story that we tell ourselves about that car. That's the thing that's like, that makes, one car or another, whether that's a Prius or a Lamborghini, quote unquote, cool.
Right. So, all right. So I have a question. So obviously what we're talking about, it's not really that simple. It is, and it isn't. It can be simple, but it's kind of it's intimidating. I guess that's what I want to say. So thinking about content in these ways, and thinking about building community, and thinking about having a multiple prong approach to connecting with your folks, it's kind of intimidating for a lot of leaders in both for and not for profit. How do you make the people you work with, how do you make them feel more comfortable about taking that leap?
Wow, that's a really great question. I think one of the things we do is we like to start with strategy. And that, for us, can be a fairly robust exploration into where they're trying to go. So we try to get goals established. We try to look for that value proposition. So we'll do a lot of research in the early phases, where we're trying to get an understanding of not only who their audiences are, but what those people actually think about the organization, in terms of what were the motivating factors that caused them to pick this particular organization. And it's a really interesting exercise, because a lot of the time when we ask our clients up front, what are the things that that create opportunity for you. Why are people purchasing from you versus somebody else? So, trying to get to that differentiation statement, a lot of times it's incredibly far off from what we hear from the clients themselves. And there's a really, fairly economical exercise that almost everyone can do is if you have any reviews at all, so testimonials or reviews, you can just go through those reviews and start writing down the adjectives that people use to describe the business that they were reviewing. And from there, you can start to see patterns and trends and really tease out the idea that, communication was the thing, not how clean their equipment was. And so really starting from that strategy piece and getting that due diligence and doing those exercises to really get a good feel for what the customer journey is. I think that's the first step, because then we have a plan and we all know what direction we're rowing. And so it's a lot easier to create, content itself, but also create compelling content if you know what's motivating the people who are going to be reading it. And so that kind of that exercise and creating that framework, I think is one thing that helps ease that anxiety around content creation. And then setting goals. I mean, one of the things, and I was just talking with one of my friends about this today, actually, is as people, we really like to push the envelope, and we like to say, oh, I'm going to do 20 blog posts next month. And it's like, okay, that's great.
It's probably not going to happen, right?
How many are you doing now?
Right.
Let's try and establish something achievable and realistic. But also, what tends to happen is when you miss the first 3 and you're way behind after the first week, we tend to think that any miss on the goal itself is complete failure, as opposed to looking at how much we actually did get done. So, for example, if I've set a rock, or if I've set a goal to do 10 blog posts in a month, and I do 9, from the way that our brains work, we tend to think of that as a failure,
right,
as opposed to a pretty huge success, because you got 9 out of 10 blog posts out there. That's amazing.
Right.
And so, creating consistency, it's really helpful both from an audience standpoint. It's helpful from an SEO standpoint. It's helpful just to get in rhythm and be able to see how well you can accomplish creating content. And it also helps you create a bundle of material that then you can bring into specialized pages. So hub pages are something that we've started to create, where we'll come up with a topic and then link out to all these other things that we've written over the years, or that the customer has written over the years, or created, that help support that hub pages goal, I guess. So I would say just creating content itself, if you can just get started and then set an intention and stay consistent with that, those are some of the things that we would recommend.
Right.
How are you guys handling that pushback when clients aren't excited about their content journey?
Well, it's really tough, because a lot of people we work with spend their days doing some really important work, and it's hard to make the case that giving me a half day to talk about what makes them different is a better choice than literally helping someone with their life, or solving some hands-on issue. Which isn't always the case, but sometimes that is the case. But it's just trying to get them out of there, and everybody. One of the things that I always talk about is that all of us forget what others don't know, because we spend so much time in our heads that we forget that, oh, well, doesn't everybody know that we are going to be moving in a year? Oh, I guess they wouldn't know that, would they? But do you know what I mean? It's we forget what's inside our head, and inside our head alone. And so what we do is we help, and this is where the ask phase really comes in and is helpful. We really help them step back and think about the people they're trying to help, the people they're trying to bring along with them, the work that they're trying to accomplish, and remind them what the rest of the world doesn't know. And then once they see that, once they realize that, oh yeah, we have to tell them. If we don't tell them, then they're never going to figure out. We're never going to get X, Y, or Z done. And so by helping get them out of their own heads, just for a little bit, and think about what's out there and what's not out there, that really does typically motivate them to really get behind this idea of strategic messaging and the execution.
Yeah, differentiation is so hard, and we are constantly bumping up against that with ourselves as well as
Right.
as others, and that's, I think, why great organizations like Spencer Brennan and hopefully Relish exist, is that we're able to kind of bring an outside perspective. I think, most people are fairly humble, and they don't like to brag about, I guess we're probably, a lot of us were taught at an early age, you're not supposed to brag about yourself and whatnot. And so, so it's hard to get to differentiation, and having someone on your team that you bring in to help you get an outside perspective to really say, this isn't easy for everybody else. Whatever it is that you're doing, whether that's, helping feed hungry kids or, or sell widgets, it might be something that's actually really hard for
Right.
the vast majority of us. But when you do it every day, you think, oh, that's not that big of a deal. That's just building websites or whatever. It's like, well, most people can't do that.
Right. And, it also bears repeating that we really can't cut your own hair, or at least you shouldn't. And that's what we do. We go in and help people do the things that they can't do themselves. They could, but the outcome would be pretty horrific. So we just go in and try to help them out.
Yeah, I think the last time I cut my hair, my mom was very, very much displeased with that particular effort. But yeah, it's amazing how, and I think, you said it really well, just how in our heads we get, and being able to have someone help you step outside of that, and really help you figure out what that value proposition is, or that differentiation statement. That's an investment in your content that can go a long way, because it allows you to stay on message.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I know you talk about staying on message quite a bit. How much do you focus on that with your clients?
Oh, that's constant. That is almost the whole, not the whole point. That's one of the main elements, because consistency is so important across all the different channels, all the different media, and all the different people that are talking. So one of the things, and we alluded to this in the very beginning, but I'm really passionate about the idea that your employees, no matter what you do, your employees have to have the same messaging with each other and with the people they interact with that you do in your more traditional marketing. So consistency is massive. And so that's why we really try, in our build phase, we really try to help organizations hone in on those 3 or 4 things that make them relevant and competitively differentiated from all the other options that people have. And it's somewhat tough when we work with some not-for-profits, because they think, ew, competitors, that's for profit. We don't have that. Well, yeah, you do. Actually, you do. And so we try to come up with the 3 to 4 things that make that organization who they are. It's almost proof points to demonstrate, to put up against their why what they do is important, how they do it differently than everybody else. And so if you focus on those 3 to 4 pillars, or 3 to 4 articulations of what the organization does, it's really easy to stay consistent, because you're not pulling from 100 different places. You're pulling from one of 3 to 4 places. And as long as everything wraps up to one of those 3 or 4, your message, not only is your message consistent, but it actually helps keep your strategy on focus or on point, because you can ask yourself, if someone throws up a new idea, like, oh, well, does that fit into one of our 3 or 4 points of differentiation? And if not, well, then probably it's not what your organization should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had one client say to me that one of the things that she got from working with me is she got the permission to say no to things, because she had a very clear, we all together came up with a very clear structure for what her message was that aligned with who the organization was. And so that gave her a framework, and that's why we call it a framework, a focus and messaging framework. That gave her a framework through which to make decisions that kept her and her message on focus.
Yeah, I remember an exercise that I can't remember who taught it to me, but it was essentially a sales type exercise. And if you came up with, let's say, 4 or 5 questions or things that you were looking for during a sales process, and essentially created a target, and so you have let's say you have a target with 5 rings, and you start asking these questions and getting answers to these questions, and if they were on target, then you would move one step in. And so, if you got 1 of the 5, you'd be 1 ring in, and 2 of the 5, you'd be 2 rings in. Mm-hmm. And if you could get to 5 of the 5, that was like a very highly targeted, perfect kind of sales opportunity. But if you were only getting 1 or 2, then it was probably something that you may want to pass on. And I think that having that and understanding what one's core values are, and whether you're hiring or even bringing in a vendor, or even targeting for a client, for example, just knowing what those items are that make up your ideal partner is really important.
Right. Because, the great thing about entrepreneurs, whether they're social entrepreneurs or anybody that starts or runs an organization, the great thing about them is they're typically idea people. They've got all these great ideas. But the bad thing about them is they idea people, and they've got all these great ideas. And folks like that, we need them, but they also need someone to say, all right, let's think about this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not try to do everything. I'm a big fan of saying I can do anything, I just can't do everything. And so let's think about what is it that we can do, and more importantly, what is it we should do? Because just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Going back to that whole haircut thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've read Traction ever or not. It's a book by Gino Wickman, and it's also called the Entrepreneur's Operating System, I believe.
Nice.
And they, in that, he creates a framework for every organization, and maybe not every organization, but most organizations kind of have this sort of, or could benefit from this sort of structure. And you have the visionary, and that may be the founder at the early stages, and that person may actually be the general manager during the early phases where they're wearing a lot of hats. But at some point, you need to allow that person to continue to be that innovative thinker, mm-hmm. and then insert an implementer or like a COO type of person, right. In between that that top role and getting things done, because those of us who are always thinking of new things to do, I call it the shiny squirrel syndrome. Right. We're constantly coming up with some brilliant new idea that maybe not so brilliant, or it might be incredibly brilliant. But if you are constantly chasing those ideas around, your team will never actually get much done. Right. And so it's a really interesting way of thinking about how to kind of segment those roles just to make sure that the people stay on target.
Until the universe decides to help us see clearly what are good ideas and what are not, we're going to have to think of some other way to sort them out.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what a good COO will help do is say, okay, well, we're going to put that one over here for a while, or that one's worth, moving some things around, or at least getting it into the queue for the next 30-day sprint, or whatever it is that however your particular organization works.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, and we should probably start to wrap up soon, because I've enjoyed this and I think we're doing great. But I don't think there's only so much time that people will listen to me, and I'm sure I'm bringing your numbers down. But so tell me, what is it you love most about what you do?
I am a kind of a person who really just loves helping people, and I love to serve and really kind of serve selflessly in a lot of respects. And so, the reason we moved to this kind of purpose-driven idea was I was working on a project on a Memorial Day weekend. It was gorgeous out, and it was about 2 p.m. on a Sunday, and we were working for one of our nonprofit partners, and I was hammering away on some project that they needed done, shortly after the holiday. And I stopped and I said, I'm not mad about this. And so it's really just helping people out and helping people figure out how they can become their best. And I think that we do a really good job of that with the strategy first model. And if I can, continue to help people do that and do that every day, that's what gets me out of bed.
Nice. Very nice.
How about you?
I love, and it's pretty similar. I love seeing people get excited about what they do. I love, and I kind of alluded to this before, I love helping people fall back in love with what they do, because people get so focused on the day to day. And so I love getting people excited and helping them realize how great they're doing, and even how great they can do, the potential that they have. And I just love helping. I can't, I don't have the skill set to keep people from being sick. I don't have the skill set to comfort someone who's been through a trauma. I don't have the skill set to save the planets, through specific means. But I do have the skill set to help those people who do all that stuff do it better, do it, and talk about it to more people that matters. And so I'm honored to be able to have that ability, that opportunity, not necessarily ability. I'm honored to have the opportunity to help people who are helping us all.
That just sounds amazing. I love that approach, and I totally agree. There's certain things that we can do and certain things we can't do, but if we can leverage those skills or those talents that we have to enable those other people who have other abilities be their best, that's a win for everybody.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed our conversation again today.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing me onto your show and being on my show. I really appreciate it, Douglas.
Thank you for bringing me onto your show and being on my show.
Well, my pleasure. I'm end my shows in an interesting way, or at least I hope it's interesting, is I really love having conversations, but I'm also kind of a man of action and want people to actually take what they've heard or just have something to do at the end of listening to my shows. If there was one thing that you would like the Relish This audience to do after listening to our show, what would that be?
That's a great question. I think I would like everybody who's listening just to take a second and pause. And if that literally means hitting pause on your phone or whatever, feel free to do that. But just hit pause for a second and think about one thing about their work that they know, but not everyone else might understand. So just take a minute and think about something, find something that is going on in your head that would be beneficial for everyone else to know, but you just never occurred to you to talk about it. And then stop, then hit play again, because, we're not done.
Yeah. And I would say take that thing and share it. Kind of help spread that knowledge around would be maybe even a next step there. All right. Create some content around it.
Exactly. All right. So I like to end my show with a question called Crazy Town.
Okay.
What is one of the craziest asks that you've gotten from a client, and how did you manage to either talk them down gently or actually make it happen?
Wow. That is a great question. I am not sure exactly what I would say. I did have a crazy sales meeting one time.
Okay.
Where my business partner and I were in a sales meeting, and this was pre-legalization of recreational marijuana here in the state of Colorado. And we were in a sales meeting talking to a guy about his project, and he had nothing to do with that industry. And he like opened up his desk drawer and pulled out a pipe and asked us if we wanted to smoke during what was, for us at the time, a very serious sales meeting. So that was kind of one of the crazier sales meetings that I've had.
That's pretty awesome.
I'll have to get back with you on the request.
No, you're done. That's pretty awesome. So, what did you do?
Well, we both respectfully declined, but he went ahead and partook, and we did not actually win that contract. Which I don't know if that was because we were reluctant to smoke with him, or because it wasn't the right fit, but
or that he didn't smoke enough.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, who knows?
Right. Well, that's another conversation if we do this again, which I hope we do, because this has been great. That's another conversation. We could talk about the cannabis industry and everything that goes into branding and messaging around that, because as that's starting to gain traction across the United States, and I heard that even President Biden is starting to soften his point of view on legalization of cannabis. I think that could be a really cool conversation.
Yeah, for sure. We actually have a little bit of experience in that space. We had some clients very early on, which was an interesting time in that industry. So yeah, we could certainly have another conversation all about that. That'd be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have to bring up pipes. We can just do it as is. Although it is legal in Massachusetts as well as Colorado, so we wouldn't be breaking any laws.
Well, good. That would be horrible.
Right. What kind of examples would we be setting? That's terrible.
Exactly. Well, thank you again for having this conversation with me. I had a really great time.
Me too. Thank you again for having this conversation with me. It's been really fun.
I will talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Bye. All right. There you have it. Another great episode of Relish This. Thanks for listening. If you would like to learn more about how to apply the audience engagement cycle to expand your organization's mission, there are two things you can do. Right now, you can go to missionuncomfortablebook.com to download a copy of my book. And while you're there, you can get your purpose-driven marketing score to see where you can unearth some gold for your organization. If you'd like to listen to back episodes of the show or sign up to be a guest, go to relishstudio.com/podcast. That's it for this week. I'll be back next week for another great episode of Relish This.